Hi, the recording started. Is the 1AC sent?
Yeah.
It's the same one, right?
Yeah.
I'm good.
I'm ready.
I'm gonna record on my phone as well.
Yeah, good, for sure.
Okay. The meta-ethic is moral relativism as described here rather than make up the same of the world. Anything else stops the moral relativism in 16. 2008 is recognized by morality, responsible moral person, moral truth, for every person there's no individual moral principles, everything is based on individual desires. That necessitates individual agency, growth 84. To begin neighbor agent for purposes of regardless kind of agent possesses the rights of freedom over every agent must act all the rights of the agency, and every agent must act in accord with the rights of freedom. Agency is first term to also free my one is an inference of principle. Agency acts independent of other agency not have a capacity and your agency to domination of principle. The inference is legitimate so far as it does not dominate your agency is freedom is not domination due to distinguishing arbitrary inference not domination guides legitimacy and justifies state inference justified individual freedom headed 12. The legitimacy is security statement by like insurance imposed by constitutional freedom is about a matter of civic status and the inference intrusion that meaning that we dominate the government will not be jeopardizing its sex control over interference. Further, addition was obligation domination environment predictions of the because using text proof induction that circle also opposed the cat action because the only no consequence ever happens when it's performed to the arguments presupposed you have the freedom to present the usual bending certain arguments in instance of arbitrary interference and domination there is embodying the same obligation to all assess what is good but ought to be good or else you can just objectify of goodness itself as you can start which was constituting to stress the obligation to feature that intrinsic to agencies and agency must follow certain rules only practical agencies constitute states can use rationally decide against decoupled active deciding through rejection practical agency engaged in it and also 4 points that egoism is true because the violence comes to the anti-reject non-courteous or stop understands but that has go from the top 12. This is human category different from all choices to go the versions of the real condition keep money and point flipping others of motivation or sub benefit influence of action from results association will mechanisms of self-vision once we gain negative correlate with empathic and serve a difference between the real behavior and hypothetical and the reflected in the recruitment of neurobiological systems. 3 points that theories and ideals essential ideals alternative fields into also on fixed principles and default relativism. You get mentioned with the rule is constantly changing means the standard hold people to 4 minutes interpretation of video must not reteach you have from field to kill fields of kitchen by forcing the videos from single frameworks and the resolution ethical statement which means this is remote deliberation that way searches is like we're educational values to debate and at least specifically learn to build about ethics switching policy cells and anything else most rules says everyone needs to be an ethical decision but most people won't be compulsive makers or policy makers consider unethical policy has all of its experience it's rare because also 5 points ethical theories are insular that define the good in language and describe in their own term of choice too. Mathematics is room unless one says there's one number greater than one under the philosopher's question are the numbers the question does not make sense to remember 60 that says mathematics the answer is yes because the very notion of the could only be understood within that remember doesn't see dispute or not arguing over the truth of the practical value. 6 point is that massive causal ramification to get any conception of the foreseeable good can attempt. How do you really intend to do both your opinions or possible kind of individual intuition you're gonna tell you which own actions are better. We cannot make any decision from ethical system if we can't should compare if there be a possible if it was accident and the amount good if it had everything if it's also always can also changing good power policy 30 years so again they would the benefits that way they always cost us advocacy. That's it from no solution United States of Century reason reasons of station without version of this resolution is general principle which should means that show he'll treat him out of the temper critical circumstances all defend like reference to specificity sort of parties that doesn't require me to minimum maximum fields of and also bunch of future agree on the self backing against any beast theory one would staff against one area theory since then it can be very influently beast early but everyone know RV committing into theory first the one area is too short to one by theory and since a bigger time trade of 1 force which 1 7 you put it up the bidder 7 is bad because the neck get up player and see when is competing interest means the 2 and just can't double out reasonability rather than exclusively what they did wrong D1 is no RV because the neck has the advantage on the theory later 2 was the one is because one job the bidder when you choose up to 4 times means when you're supposed to undercover multiple such storms anything they can go for the most undercover shall not the best commercials when you're putting your job or results anything else makes you restricted which always quantified by the job the bidder or to excuse offense. Then, a principle of international hierarchy is a domination of the concept 13. International hierarchy by Muslim origin is essentially problematic leadership is exploitive power rates and produces subordinate states that other leading states just might behave as a tolerance but such rooms of loose domination coercion is practiced in regard to the interests of the target. 2 points in military intervention is violence the principles of logical self-determination conquers 19. And non-interference means the state should not impose will however also to gone into something dictatorship bringing democracy Monta imposed no 1 key source of totalitarian non-interference emphasis preservation of long distance makes self-determination country the one's envision that it must have thought empathy that their constant words of injustice to action it not only the department minister of violence but economic assistance to respect local people and their conception. 3 points is intervention to arbitrary interference that prevents synthetic democracy so 17. Non-intervention could enable citizens to determine always one ways of life in the government achieved by anyone who would not be authentic or self-determining but remember others not only as citizens of them so can be defined. No presumption or permissibility but affirms somebody you presume saying what you're treating so proven other ways such a many names but intuition always in the bids for all arguments when you start trying to reason with that have you question that primary principle is infinite aggressive advantage is a wrong green presence in the region multiplies escalation vectors of words that turns in provokes a direct military confrontation close to 10-16. The US doesn't choose the Middle East to refuse disclosed basis of tactic bomb, a running back malicious growing presence, contributing representations with the wrong driving control, middle career, who got salty, so look, base, central detention with the wrong regional word difficulty, and gadget different text, charter predictive points for the deterrent text event and do large amount of presence, increase conflict enemies more points of conflict presence serves as a deterrent to their convenient target. Existing force spread posture is antithetical to the deterrence consistency 712. Running proxy subject to the duplicate roster attack presence in that liability US trust, dollars set that empowering analysis making regional or likely objectives better serve the alternative strategies and return to rejects and not stop the attacks attack an areas feature the use of abilities missile first time used against the money or user presence not continue with security interests. The wrong word has nuclear blast and cause extinction of Avery 20. Aggressive against provocation can escalate into force skill war while it might develop into World War III running inside with the Russia and China attack will escalate elsewhere or Pakistan could be overthrowing the juicy nukes and Russia and China might be runs to nuclear war damage global agriculture for human civilization in the biosphere. Util. One point is that naturalism fails to define goodness as an empirical condition which fails to test a beauty for reality and can account for unique sensory experience more 3. Good isn't capable of any definition of as or as good as a single a simple and indefinite quality consider yellow measure defined physical equivalent light vibrations but reflection is that as a vibration so not only what we perceive it may be true that which all things are good are also something but do many felt that there's properties good also defines something good. 2 is that like I've experienced in the phenomenal world and is when they also be impossible to derive an off from descriptive premises there needs to be an additional operative premises within a nominal world for a world 3 1 is specific engagement is key to self-existential risk self 3 self small 6. Confronting global warming supervisors, commerce syndicates, cooperation, particularly the peer requires a radical transformation of education. The longer politics has effective tool and becomes our chance becomes convincing these potential for positive change of engagement to more means, context, and privileges of even has our mission to democracy. 4 is that non-domination solves moral uncertainty better 99. So both we take steps to reduce uncertainty and subordination. We're promoting domination without promoting these effects. People will find their entity to true attainment and the person's ability to make plans to undetermined by uncertainty. Go for 6.
Alright. What is an agent?
What is an agent? We say an agent is someone who can sort of intrinsically go about setting a maxim.
How do we determine who can set a maxim?
How do we determine who can set a maxim? Is someone who can logically extend the reason to
can a cat set a maxim?
Can cats set a maxim? Cats can certainly set their own maxims, but we say we only sort of value human agency insofar as it has a relational.
Why is human agency distinct from cat agency?
Why is human agency distinct from cat agency? I think there's a difference in the ability to reason outside of just moral egoism. I would say cats are just driven by survival instincts, but humans are able to make
How can you make that distinction?
How can you make the distinction? I think scientific basis for
What scientific basis is the affirmative justified?
What scientific basis is the affirmative justified? Or I guess we just syllogistically warrant that people who have agency, or also I feel like this argument is kind of redundant. Even if it can't draw the exact line on who becomes an agent or not, the fact that we know agents exist means we should just arbitrarily
Well, but how do we know who are agents even if we know agents exist?
How do we know who
so
are
the
agents?
app can't answer that question.
I mean, you didn't. Can you repeat the question?
How do we know who are agents even if we know agents exist?
Again, I think it's about maxim setting. If I'm able
to
reason.
How does the affirmative framework balance competing moral claims? For example, the Jensen evidence indicates that moral truths can vary from person to person. And what if people can have conflating moral truths that conflict with one another?
Yeah, so the app doesn't claim to jurisdict between competing ethical claims. We merely say that different competing ethical claims will always exist sort of in the state of nature, and our goal is to build an authentic democracy that can preserve as many people's ethical concerns as possible, which the first
How do you preserve ethical concerns when they conflict, when they conflict?
Okay, so we say sort of civic republicanism provides good tools for this. We say in the United States right now, people definitely have different ethical claims, but can coexist under a democracy. It's not perfect, but we say sort of.
So sorry, the framework is just just we should have everyone voice their concerns.
It's civic republicanism.
Just to confirm, if there was a society and say 99% of the people, out of 100 people, wanted to murder the other person. And because it is a majority, civic republicanism would
it's not pure democracy. It's civic republicanism. Republicanism.
Can you explain the constraints on that? And why
republicanism values the intrinsic agency of all peoples, which means acts that intrinsically violate people's agency are bad, regardless of if they're a majority.
Okay, so it is not just based off. So then, how does the AF evaluate claims? You said earlier that the AF evaluates competing claims based off of what people evaluate. You said it's also now based on agency. Which one is it?
We syllogistically warrant civic republicanism using our claims about agency, i.e. people have agency, and people use that agency to make their own moral truths, which means we have to have an authentic democracy.
Okay, so sometimes it's fine.
Agency.
Okay, I guess that's fine. Can you explain to me why this justifies state interference?
Why justify? It doesn't justify state interference. That's the
whole
whole
Petit evidence, the tag says, quote, and justifies state interference.
Yeah, I think it's misunderstanding what state interference means. I mean, that's cross, but So state interference in this context is just saying like the state has the ability to make good decisions for its people if those decisions are not violating someone's intrinsic agency. So it's like, it's legit versus non-legit interference, which is what the impact TOC evidence has been.
Okay, I'm setting the doc. It's a one-off case.
Can I watch?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No. You said one out. Case framework within the advances, or
Yeah, it's like overview, framework, and then detail.
I am.
You good? Okay. Settlerism is an everyday process shaped by active investments in institutions that claim jurisdiction over native land work in PHC 13. Settlement gives rise to effective rights. Policies becomes the beauty of everyday certainty, such as enable access to indigenous territories come to be lived, which are conditions of personage, practical, conscious system, with a specific economic, political, and cultural system, to simple experience, the common sense of claiming of a natural right to indigenous space sides of the heart of non-native modes of governance. Settler colonialism cannot be local to the specific period of logical elimination, drives settler governance, and social organization force that drives from the draft expansion, elimination as organizing principle of the native, repressing the structure settler society, and civic problematism is a radical assumption, grant political legitimacy, feel the state are problematic to all 14, just like colonization, making the role of the same imperial state and settler, conquest of those role of the same public life, civic republicanism, of course, settler colonization, real is apex with the territorial control of North America, the state where there's a way of democratic virtues, if you're among the citizens, especially the develop the state, having any part in civil colonization, disavow the role of the settler conquest in shaping democracy, means the dialectic experience the condition, or is the modern democracy constructed the individual as primary agent of empire than the state, and settler colonialism is deeply engaged in Western culture that reflects the universal logic of non-naturalistic ethics or philosophy gets appropriate to justify the extermination of indigenous peoples because its cultural starting point against in 12. A settler culture is permanent placed in colon, no setting enters misorganization with the cultural next of culture destruction. This is based on the culture's barrier to the individual combined in universal action philosophy of the West. The immaterial principles argued to be beyond specific cultures and superior to all the Middle East invocation of freedom and devastating effects relations of culture power generally the cultural relationship. Allowing philosophers of responsibility, content, art, and same logic quality of this universal civilization can only be achieved in giving up their own ways of life and adopting European ways. Western powers their culture interwoven in ideal theory universality is a form of abstraction away from the material violence of settler colonialism. Their view from nowhere is not only used as practically problems settlerism. Nichols 13 civilizers provide justification of Western imperialism. Ideal theory philosophers have been reluctant to engage in the complex historical narratives. Ideal set argue that guiding principles can be generated starting from away from specific conditions. Philosophy ideal civil societies and promising extermination indigenous peoples use to shift the argumentation from a highly stressed level of belief in the burden of proof from colonial states settlers distinguish the state of the nature of first reasons no indigenous studies and second by legitimizing the violence equal to an ideal source that is based on historical sensation and just on the occupation of indigenous territories. The alternative is a call for placement education. This requires leading theorizing to present realities and justice, acknowledging the way settler colonialism creates these injustices to ground strategies and normative theories. The alt is unconditional, doesn't fiat anything, and is not a floating peg idea to find a coherent theory violation. See right 14. Place education to examine the conception of waste in Western knowledge, the understanding subordinate space of words, personal ontological through Western knowledge, normalizes domination through settled criticism, absolute norms, curate one's relations to the world, normative theory, should we start where we are on, and just surround us rather than speculating perfect justice, philosophy, resistance, might become the structural counter domination, elucidate the episode mechanics of settled colonialism, encourage critical interrogation, place education, engage the complex of some manipulation, being the most domination, natural world, politics, self-settlers, which is place normative habits that be done for impacting the financial based education. The discourse of the 180s, partially settler relations, that are written in the logic of domination, centering conditions, scholarship, and questions epistemology, is your role as addressed here at 14. Settlers is the place to rest on knowledge that theologies and ideologies from established how the world is to be interpreted. Tradition is logic for domination, is not a historical parts of still traces are placed to be limited through teaching and to normalize the practices epistemic limitations, traditions of racial hierarchies, world discourses, manifest cultural assumptions, individual actors of agency, tradition, epistemic transitions, practices go against the greatest breaks, can inspire epistemic friction and uncounted for moments, assumptions can begin to catalyze critical consciousness. Case. Topical framing issues. 1. Every morally repugnant blip in the 1AC is an independent link they shouldn't be allowed to kick out of. Refusal to hold the alpha accountable for the racist choices they made in the 1AC encourages students to knowingly blip out racist one-liner strategic gains in form of subtle fluidity. 2. You shall not reject any framework argument that claims that the impacts of the K do not matter. Denying things like genocide or racism matter makes the basics unsafe and it discourages the development of racist activity that outweighs A. Accessibility. Maintaining a safe environment is a prerequisite to every other impact. B. It disproves the conclusion of the theory even if you can't pinpoint exactly where it fell apart. 3. We can need to respond to spikes or hidden arguments. Anything else that outweighs the 1AC hiding bibby arguments to avoid clash or sex engagement. 4. I'm making this clear. I'm not going to read Utah. They cannot extend their Utah offense. There are 2 roll ballots in the round. Their framework and the con rule of the ballot. And if we win their framework is wrong, you should evaluate the case framing explicitly non-utilitarian about the asked research project, not the consequences of the plan, the line by line. First, their Jensen evidence. 1 is like admiral disagreement is a descriptive fact with no bearing on what ethics ought to be. 2, relativism is repugnant. Views genocide is good and bad is comparable moral claims. 3, NC identifies structural and therefore universal relationships between subjectivity and places a starting point for ethics. Offers escape from relativism. The agency evidence. 1, individuals can act in contradiction of their conception of the good, i.e. idly twiddling thumbs or acting on impulse. Actions are determined the relative notions of ethics. 2. Fallacy of origin. Freedom might be necessary action regarded as the good, just as action is necessary for living, but maximizing oxygen is an end line for moral good even if life is. 3. Incoherent and subjective conceptions of good require domination, i.e. a collectively accepted notion of U.S. sovereignty requiring indigenous clearing, like in the Dow's Act. They can justify freedom as a universal good on the grounds that enables access to individual conceptions of the good. If individual conceptions of the good demand violations of freedom, the prefer additionally, they say obligations into induction and predictions are good enough and reliable. Consequences like the sun rising are consistent. And deduction relies on induction. Formation premises must be based on the natural world, i.e. how do we know what Miller's presence is, or what it does, or what freedom is. This affirmativity conflates needs with the desires that was above. Bindingness, some agency, agents can choose not to respect or prioritize the agency of other agents, even if they have to be agents themselves. Egoism. No, there are no warrants for egoism is the root cause of why the act can solve. The root cause, there is no reason. The aft's conception of morality suddenly alleviates everything wrong with status quo conceptions. Ideal theorizing is not the aft. They haven't pointed to a vision of the world or how they reach there. The Joyce evidence, no implication. It just proves we can form truths. No reason why the aft helps us form these truths. It also concedes that the affirmative politics idea that we should protect the freedom of every single person, evident in cross-sex, is one that makes it impossible to organize indigenous modes of criticizing settler states. It makes it impossible to contest forms of the state. It makes it impossible to organize movements of decolonization, which is incompatible with the alternative. The gainer evidence, aggregation solves forms of violence are worse because they risk more pain than pleasure. Don't let perfect be the enemy of the good. They haven't made any claims as to why it would make it impossible, even if it would be harder. The method page. The more evidence doesn't matter. We don't defend a conception of the good, and this evidence is specific to that. Also, unifying aspects of good are universal. All people experience pain and suffer from violence, which makes it contingent to all of them, and also resolves any relativism explanation that the one year extends the ISO gap. No, experience shapes how we are. We can form moral statements based on the natural world. They haven't explained as to why we cannot connect the two, and if we are winning, that everything in the natural world informs the normative statements we can make, i.e. how we can know what things in the world are, then it means that their framework must rely on some form of consequences. The civic engagement is key. The AF doesn't solve. A framework does not invoke youth involvement. There is no reason voting AF endorses their methodology writ large, even if there is some benefit. Even so, they have conceded that in some instances they do not allow for civic engagement if it quote-unquote violates agency, which means that there are some examples of scenarios where the app would not do that. Some extra time. Go back up to the overview. No one-year theory, new two-year responses guarantee F wins or force intervention since we have no 3 and R, no infinite abuse, A diminishing returns, generic grouping, and one argument is enough to take out under-highlighted sparse offs, B judges, no one votes on tricks, and we all strike scopa, worst case default reusability, and drop the argument since one-year theory is F biased, and 2 years can blow up 10-second arguments. Their warrants are incoherent. They say that the 1 year is too short to in theory and substance. Good 1 hours will make quick arguments. The negative can obviously not spend too long with them because Fs can always go for the argument that had the least time on. They say drop the argument is severance. No, it's not. The negative might be able to up layer, but they would have to spend substantive amounts of time inside of the 2 and R. No competing interps. So the 2 and were to dump on reasonability, the F can just go for substance, which solves the entirety of their offense because it would mitigate the magnitude of the abuse story since the 2 and R would now have to spend less time on the offense. Yeah.
Good for CX.
Yeah.
Okay, starting now. The line by line, you said relativism is bad because it justifies repugnancy. I guess, how does your case solve repugnancy claims or provide objective account of what's good or bad?
Our argument is that we should not always endorse what people value and that sometimes it makes sense to center our conception of morality with an understanding of experience in the past. Our alternative says that there is something morally problematic with domination that must be incorporated within ethical frameworks, which is why we think it should be a side constraint.
Okay, I guess, how do you justify the moral relevance of your ethical claims? I guess.
Well, we make 2 claims. First, we think that the moral relevance of claims are not significant. If we can prove why the affirmative's links are complacent in a logic of genocide and are racist, it should be reason to drop you, because every framework must reject these general impacts.
How does the negative reject these impacts?
But second, our alternative is a meta-ethical constraint on the affirmative's interpretation of ethics. You should think of the alternative not necessarily as an action towards decolonization, not necessarily as a paradigm, but a side constraint on ethics, which itself is an alternative theory of ethics.
You have just said the alternative is a meta-ethical constraint on the AF. I guess my question is, what in the NC intrinsically explains your impacts that they are bad? You say the AF is bad because
we say that violence against indigenous people is bad.
Yes, I understand that, but you say the alternative is a meta-ethical constraint on the AF. What sort of providing, what ethical accounts?
Sure, the theory evidence indicates that we should focus on dominance. This idea of domination should be a central focus of our idea of normative.
Is the critique naturalist?
Not necessarily, no.
Not necessarily? Okay, then what is it?
Again, that's what I'm saying. The critique
Explain.
is a side constraint on whatever theory of morality the affirmative provides. Our argument is not necessarily that we need to start from scratch and provide a new theory of morality, but that whatever theory of morality that the affirmative thinks might be good needs to incorporate some sense of domination inside of its understanding of what is moral and what is immoral. Theory evidence is very explicit on this.
Makes sense. Okay, I guess line blind, you said reject any affirmative argument that claims the impacts of the K don't matter. I guess, or actually, that's fine. I guess going to the induction page, you said deduction relies on induction. What's the warrant, I guess, for our specific indicted induction?
The ability for you to make claims about the natural world, understand how military presence works, what it is, and make claims about the effects it has on people, i.e. how it results in domination, how when we project military presence we go into states, requires in some interpretation of experiences, some interpretation of the past and what we have done. It is impossible to know that military presence by definition involves America going into regions, dominating other people.
Just because we
without talking
learn
about it.
Things, why does that
Well,
justify
the point is you
past
assume
experiences?
induction exists. For you to understand what military presence is and then make a normative claim about the validity of military presence, you must have some understanding of what
Sure.
it is, and that demands an
what was the
interpretation of the natural world.
Okay, that's fine. Starting prep. Case K, I'll send the doc out.
Hi. Is it the okay? On the order of the case, is it the overview? Is it the non-method? The
Sure.
method style? How are you doing that?
Yeah, so case is going to be framework offense,
Okay.
and then generic, 1 point from the obligations, the preferred additionally, and then I'll extend part of the framework on the set call page.
Okay.
Just yeah, I'll send it.
signpost where you are, because
Let me know when everyone got the doc, or I just sent it in the body, but
yeah.
everyone got it.
Oh, you sent it to everybody.
Cool. I got it.
Awesome. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Cool.
Extend the standard of non-domination to government intervening since is good if it maintains your agency and well-being that firms and military intervention even maintains power asymmetries let the use of government dominate versus born and ceases interest with the logic of a dominative relationship with like constant con extend induction bills as Henderson induction bills because certain induction to prove induction it takes the cases all the links and impacts or consequences will be generate consequences since the use of induction they say it's not they say good is good enough for probability and generate consequences is a non-starter press the argument even more since the use of inductive knowledge to prove something is probable in the first place they say deduction relies on induction no deduction exists I know to prove that equals 4 even if I learn about how to apply deductive rules that doesn't warrant induction which is using past experiences to justify future events even as justify future events it's just an answer to the argument also they conceded the gainer evidence which says that causal ramifications take any impact of the consequential good i.e. even if something has a first order if something's first order consequences are bad the second and third order consequences could flip the other way which means we can never actually generate consequences conceded cognitive which takes at the critique which was done above the set call page the meta-ethics is more relative to understand ethics or situations on universal truth anything else can't get choices and fails the test of relativity that's when I say Jensen it takes at their framework since each person has a different understanding of moral codes proven by political parties cultures and civil wars means their framework triggers skepticism systems of collapses different opinions proven by disagreements over blood quantum laws and different opinions over decolonial strategies they say it's repugnant and that they'll serve as a meta-ethical and straight on a half but what does this even mean they have not provided a metric for how to solve relativism which means worst case in there or sort of ethical and worst case they just default to the state of nature where everyone can just have competing ethical claims against each other which was the egoism argument and use it to commit violence against the K which I'll get to in a second they say relativism is repugnant we agree as Bobby said constraints on agency you didn't actually answer relativism which means we are the only side of this debate which you're actually resolving for the moral repugnancy of relativism which is a complete straight turn I'll answer the other I'll answer all the other case elements on the case because it was like float on the cycle page first they say agency is violent and sort of holding people to certain constraints is bad this doesn't actually answer our argument our argument is that sort of value of humans intrinsic agency is good because it allows us to not commit violence on them and allows us to understand straight structures and understand how the structures can actually influence people's lives and can actually protect people's intrinsic agency I'll get to that argument in a second first top level on the framework interpretation our interpretation was that when he seeks the ways ethical theory versus competitive alternate theory subjectivity should be sophisticated with the theory formulation versus theirs uniquely uses a bad model because of first fairness and then those arbitrary moves when I see their infinite parts of when I see the problems which force when I research that ways to be competitive again they presuppose value of evaluation of the arguments sequence pedagogic critiques around understanding virtue of this AC framework we can't interrogate oppressive norms making any liberation fail also critique proper pedestals that called non-domination limits of power for some somatic structures that dominate marginalized people which also root cause of colonialism also permutation double bind either A so strong enough to resolve the absence is only drop in the bucket of colonialism or B is too weak and cancel out the link also double bind either A points at the absence and they all agree that political relationships are structural and should be resolved by dismantling power dynamics which means perm do both or people need that power political relationships are continued and they all cancel for the superstructure of subtle colonialism love at 6 imagine empirical power suppose subject has no rights and suppose the power structures that access authority not interference conclude that subject only enjoy freedom suppose the subject revolt in the new government is interference non-interference in the life of decline of freedom political liberty is understood as a structural with Massachusetts where besides as a contingent no it's not contingent and institutions that remember the master trees and slaves and they will also not just also voting issue when it's moved to innocence less people are struggle by participating in academic equal that material change in people to when it's modification it exploits into just go for the battle runner native life so much 3 when it's say good salary feel good about nativism recruits other economies and debate debaters reading salts other debaters ethically correct practices and imperialism and colonialism are intertwined into the decolonization is services dismantling global militarism which you can completely proves are the app offense is good which was done on the link extension also non-domination argument the agency are in like the group all the agency bad arguments agency is inescapable since user agency to challenge agency which concedes the app is binding that means people can arbitrarily escape it which impacts turns all of their ontology claims as one I see gear with also Slink is trash people acting unethically in the past or having their own conceptions of morality doesn't mean striving for an ideal universal freedom is bad now we can still change past injustices also the ideal theory link ideal theory is good one point is currently ideal theory can convince colonizers to not be found proves our framework solves our impacts also tuned as a state of nature this adult rejection of ethics is worse for their impacts because it comes to ethical egoism people as in their own self-interest in restricted action which causes colonial violence which is developmental evidence also 3 points reflective egoism is ideal theory is inevitable and necessary for all action constitutions rules even the world alternative uses 4 point is contortionism absent ideal theory can legitimize any action to do under the guise of being good provided justice that after humanity is better but assault by distinguishing between arbitrary and non-arbitrary interference anything else or we've answered all the links proper and then I guess just like responses to the case page going back they say on the growth evidence is a fallacy of origin because freedom even if freedom is necessary to make an action doesn't make it intrinsically good it makes it intrinsically good because any other metric can't resolve violence which is better.
4 minutes what was the intern you read on the K?
Allow us to weigh the ethical theory of the AF
like
versus
the voting issue
huh?
you had like some voting issue
what?
You read some like voting issue?
Oh yeah I read set call like non-indigenous set call bad that was the only voting issue.
what?
Non-indigenous set call bad that was the only voting issue.
There's like non-indigenous carry set. What was the warrant?
First move to innocence like it allows you to whitewash
Just tell
the
me
bill.
the claims.
Sorry?
Move to innocence and then what?
Just commodification and savior conflicts.
Okay. settler is going to be the K and then the case. Is everyone good? No cards or anything.
Wait, okay, rewind. What's going on? Okay, so the K, is there an overview I need to fill in a separate sheet?
Not on a separate sheet. It's
Alright, so K the case?
Yeah, K.
Or are you starting on the case?
It should be the framework.
Okay. I'll just the framework. Okay. Cool. Okay.
Bring in some water. Wait, cool. We're good? Wait. The Av lose this debate because they have considered ontology. The settler party will clearly enter property exists in opposition to native populations whose structural relationships to land prevent the settler from establishing sovereignty. This logic of elimination is viewed as the only way to maintain settler jurisdictions over soil and lands. This coalition American mission to eliminate the native awareness indigenous and structure then event that's Rifkin. There are two links that were practically conceded. First is a Nicholas evidence, extend the view from nowhere link. The ideal theory and universality principle of the 1AC begins with the utopian world and without violence and evaluates actions solely on the basis of whether they would be ethical in that world. The problem is that indigenous people facing daily genocide do not live in that utopian world. An ideal theory and their arguments as to why we should not take actions that hurt people, why we should not actions that infringe on agency, prevent them from taking the non-ideal, often coercive actions necessary to attain it, like kicking settlers from their home and engaging in depth against the state. Second is a dialogue to evident link the affirmative interpretation that the state is necessary to secure claims of citizens assigned to sovereignty to determine what is right for indigenous populations. Even if the affluence of the state might be good, they've considered that it is irredeemable and that way will always prioritize indigenous people as worse. This is proven empirically, like examples in the Dow's Act when the state chose to assign indigenous people claims that they needed sovereignty or to be part of the American democracy and civic republicanism to give up their own rights, which is exactly what the affirmative's moral mission does to indoctrinate indigenous individuals. The framework page conceded this theory evidence, which means this debate is game over. The role of the ballot is to center indigenous scholarship. You should vote for the debater who better disrupts Western institutions. Our role of the ballot outweighs on portability. Arguments we defend and advocate spills over. It's the reason why governments like Germany defend contra policymakers make racist issues as a conceded argument. Conceded accessibility, which means that you know for a fact that the discourse you make inside of rounds have real world impacts, even if they win their interrupt. The link often outweighs. Conceded accessibility comes first. That was above. Fairness is a non-starter. One, they chose the app, not just a plan. They should defend all parts of it. Two, no abuse. Contesting the affirmative's approach to philosophy are major predictable components. The fact that they were able to syllogistically justify it means you should prepare to contest any reasons as to why it is racist or problematic. The pedagogies often really result in better conversation about whether your framework can actually help indigenous people, which is obviously important. The Petit solves argument. No, the framework encourages the state to determine what is right. Our argument is that interpretation is wrong and should not be assigned to the state. It also makes it impossible for indigenous people to move and organize against the state, which is uniquely important. Now, extend the alternative. In the same way the app uses syllogistic warrants like ideal theory, regress to justify the framework, the all proposes a philosophical starting point of place-based education that incorporates dominance and genocide. This means that our burden is to win a competing framework if we can prove the app is bad and the alt resolves that, and also the app cannot win if they've proven the framework is good. Just that, the point of contestation of domination is a reason to vote app. This means that any of their unique relativism good or egoism arguments that Twitter will go for is not offense. It is simply non-unique because the K is only a side constraint. The double-blind argument does not make sense. The alt is a pedagogical orientation away from the app, so you cannot do it at the same time as the app. The second argument does not make sense. The card they read says that we should organize against political relations, which is impossible if we respect agency, which the affirmative says we should do. It is impossible to challenge the structures in the first place. They also conceded ontology, so we don't know if those structures are good in the first place, which means the affirmative organizing around the state is inherently problematic, and you know that for certain. Now, the non-settlers argument. They did not ask if I was indigenous, which is reason to drop them. Assuming and classifying whether debaters are indigenous encourages teams to classify attributes, physical characteristics, clothing, or anything like behavior, emotions, and classify them if they're indigenous or not. That is violent, abusive, and you conceded accessibility outweighs because it prevents indigenous debaters from engaging in the activity. Should be reason to drop them flat out. This is messed up, but counter-interpretation will defend the violation. First, affirming says that the only ethical role of settlers is to forefront and center indigenous scholarship. What I've done. It doesn't mean I'm a good settler or any less antagonistic to the land, but rather you should vote for me rather than a settler who has actively and unethically supported the system. 2, out-of-round practices are not verifiable and a bad model for debate. Forces there should make decisions on things they don't know the nuances of. 3, we can say the alt is a good idea without embodying it because it's still a recognition of the orientation and advocacy. There's no reason me getting up and leaving would return sovereignty to indigenous people because it's a question of the larger structure. Again, the alt is not decolonization. We have not made pessimistic claims. So there's no move to innocence. We are only saying that there is violence and racist claims the 1AC has made that we have pointed out, and the affirmative should lose for that. Next, The decolonization starting points, there are no warrants for militarization is key. The AF also concedes that fiat is illusory. There is no reason the plan would actually happen or be a policy, which means they don't get any offense to the fiat impacts of the affirmative. They say agency is binding. That doesn't matter. We are not going for the Hankinson evidence. They say ideal theory is good. No, ideal theory makes movements against settler structures impossible. They say it convinces people not to be violent. No. Do you think Andrew Johnson would not have killed people or hurt indigenous lives if he just read a book of liberty and peace? Obviously not. The affirmative claims are utopian and do not account for real world violence. They have conceded ontology, which means you know that the state is always opposed against indigenous people, and ideal theory can never rectify the fundamental skews that structure hierarchies. They say it collapses the egos, so no, it is not. There is no reason that our method would result in colonialism and violence. Remember, the alternative is not a flat-out rejection of relativism, but only an argument that we should incorporate domination and understanding of the unique experiences indigenous individuals have. The arbitrariness argument does not make, inevitability argument doesn't make sense. We reject the app, so it is obviously not inevitable, the case. Conceded a few arguments in case that make this debate game over. First, conceded the deduction relies on induction, so any of their calcandites are also equally responses to the affirmative. Conceded the only way to understand how things like military presence work, why military presence would result in domination, why it would infringe on other states, or why we know what it is in the first place, assumes an understanding of the natural world, how it operates, and what the AF would do, which means that induction must be a prior question of deduction. Conceded that induction also works most part of the time. The response probability was incoherent. If you float a warrant, you were not flowing, because the one I just said, the words it is a non-starter, induction is possible. We can use facts like the sun will rise yesterday to know it will rise tomorrow, even if it isn't 100% certain. We can be confident. They most importantly conceded that arguments that prevent a critique of genocide and racist logic should be flat out dropped. They make it impossible to critique racist logics in the AF, and most importantly, must be justified in any moral framework. So if we have proven the AF is complicit in racist logic, even if we've not provided a necessarily alternative framework, we have still won that the AF is wrong under their own framework, because the AF must incorporate some critique of impacts like genocide, some critique of impacts like racism, or it is a terrible framework. The meta-ethic argument, our framework does not trigger SCEP, even if relativism exists between different interpretations, things like blood quantum. There's obviously a distinct difference between that and their theory of relativism. Also, they have conceded that the alternative can still incorporate relativism. It is only a side constraint that incorporates domination, which means that we can still understand differences between indigenous modes of thought. We should still understand that there's a distinction between incorporating the state and why that incorporating the state in all instances is problematic.
Okay, take credit. It was just the ideal theory link, right?
And the doll link. It was about civic republicanism.
Yeah. case, K, case, just framework, quick extension of offense, K, framework, the links.
Good.
Extend the standard of non-domination of government intervening synthesizes good that maintains their agency while being that affirms military interventionism, maintains a power asymmetry so that they'll use federal government dominate over subordinates for use interests with the logic of a dominative relationship with Kong. If there's any uncertainty on framework debate, you should just auto-prefer the app because we've justified a certain instance in which we have condemned colonialism empirically, which just proves the app ethic probably works even if you're uncertain of every other argument. Also, I am going to go for induction fails because the responses were terrible. It takes the critique. The critique is based on and consequence and predicated on past experience. The entire leak chain of the thesis coming with the critique is based on past experience because state existence will lead to violence, but they've conceded that it fails because using induction relies on past experiences and to justify future actions, which just uses induction itself. There's a few implications. So one point is that we don't know the thesis coming with will function in the same way we do as it will in the past. Also, there's no all solvency because we can't be sure that things will indicate that all will work any progress relies on induction. They say it's racist. No, you can prove colonialism is wrong deductively. Also, they reiterate that induction relies on induction. This is wrong and misunderstood the argument I made about induction. I obviously learned things empirically, but it's a question on if I should presume that things will operate in the same way, which they have in the past. Learning about militarism or scientific principles uses deductive reasoning, i.e., I know a pen will fall because of the law of gravity, not because of past experiences. Also, the foreseeable action stuff, you conceded that you only think induction probably works because it probably has worked in the past, which again bites the argument. It's a take-up to ontology and all solvency. Now, the K proper, first, affirmative interpretation, I completely conceded the pedagogy argument. To understand the best ethical frameworks to condemn colonialism, you have to allow for a discussion in the first place. You think this is a bad model because of 90% perfect theory of one flaw and be rejected for an alternative of literal fascism. Only allowing for me to weigh the app ethically means we can contest competing ethical claims about colonization. They say we allow for pedagogy. They allow for better pedagogy, but there's really zero more on your flow here. Also, the links proper. This entire 2 hours just an overview. They completely conceded all the link terms, which should end the debate pretty quickly. First, the ideal theory link. They've conceded that there are only 2 options: ideal theory and non-ideal theory. You should think of this debate as an advantage versus disadvantage. But when the impact of a world of the non-ideal outweighs the impact of the world of the ideal, then you should feel comfortable voting app. Extend the state of nature. They said that non-ideal theory comes to a world of ethical egoism where settlers can only act in self-interest, which proliferates fascist violence. And in terms of link and their critiques, and say the name imperfect ethical theory is better than having no ethical theory. All I need to do is not win the ethical theory. Egoism outweighs the impact of the link. One point said the link is linked to the status quo, proven by hundreds of bad ethical theories, contracts, and religions. But risk that our framework solves means it's better to its magnitude. Every 200 example of indigenous violence justified by ethical egoism. When think of like Fort Lamb, like settlers gave the fort to indigenous people, and then they discovered that it had gold, and just retook the fort, which proves that egoism means that no structural claims can ever be resolved by the alternative absent ideal theory. Now 3 points probability. The impact to the critique, but we overlook colonial violence, which is epistemic, not material, and individual, not probable. But fascism is both material and historically likely, which makes it persuasive. It also justifies perm to the alternative in the affirmative, which is conceded. We have an ideal theory. Ideal set for condemning colonial violence, which solves our egoism impacts, but also allows us to understand sort of place-based education with colonialism. Also, has a completely conceded warrant for ideal theory. They said it doesn't account for world violence, and we live in a utopian world. Even in a utopian world, we can have the redistributive structures to solve for violence, which was the app and the extension of how we solve violence. Also, the non-domination link. They have dropped the double bind. Either the app and they all agree that political relationships are structural and should be resolved by dismantling power dynamics, which means Purdue solves their ontology claims. That's completely conceded, and the level of evidence is quite good. It was quite good about having state structures to resolve moral relativism and egoism is good. It allows people to not go on their own, like companies to go into indigenous lands and exploit them for monetary gain. It was completely conceded, takes out ontology, takes out the links.